Hello, world, and welcome to Creating Light with Kelsey. Today, I have another guest, Kathleen Hayes. And Kathleen is an artist, a somatic coach, a spiritual mentor, and a lifelong seeker of magic. Her journey led her from film school to recreational therapy for children on the autism spectrum, to yoga teaching, to a master's in industrial organizational psychology, and eventually to coaching. Her lifelong anxiety, depression manifested as chronic pain, illness, burnout. Kathleen quit her quote unquote day job, dream job, the safest one anyway, and dove into the world of somatic healing and spirituality, eventually becoming certified in somatic activated healing. Her business, Embody You, is the culmination of this work and her offering to all the sensitive kids who have forgotten their power. Kathleen's wish is that this work brings you closer to yourself, to the earth, and to the magic of all things. May you remember your own magic and wield it for a kinder world. May your healing ripple out to your communities and plant seeds in every heart you touch so that all beings may be happy, healthy, and free. Welcome, Kathleen. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kelsey. This is so exciting.
Yeah, and this is your first official podcast interview, anything of the sort?
My first official podcast interview with you. It's perfect, honestly.
It is perfect because I am newer to interviewing people, so we're both just like expanding our edges. And we met. So Kathleen is also a certified somatic activated healer, and that's how we met. We were in cohort two, right out the gate, as Sadi Simone was presenting this to the world to teach teachers to become teachers, which is such a cool thing. And yeah, that's how we met. What was your first impressions? Because we had talked about this before, that how we were like drawn to each other a little bit. So just curious of what were your first impressions of me, and I'll give mine of you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was just really drawn to, this was 2 years ago, which is crazy. I can't believe it.
No, it's almost three, dude.
Oh my God, stop. Don't do
Yeah,
that to me.
it's
Oh,
2025 now,
wait,
right?
wait, wait. In 2023, January 2023.
You're correct.
Years.
Okay, you're correct.
Not to me. Oh my God. Yeah. So 3 years or 2 years, Jesus. But yeah, I remember just really being drawn to how authentic you were. Like it just really felt like we were obviously meeting online and over these group calls, and it's hard to really get to know people on an individual level like that. But I just felt like you were always so open about exactly where you're at. And I think that genuine authenticity is kind of hard to fake. And I just remember being really drawn to that. And I felt like you really helped to create a safe space for everybody else going through our training because you were so willing to be vulnerable and open.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
I fully received that. That because safety is so huge. Like we need to be able to cultivate that and create that for really whatever room that we're going to be walking in, if this is the hat that we're going to put on as
Right.
practitioners.
What we're supposed to be doing. So hopefully, that's what we're naturally good at, or at least striving to facilitate.
Yeah, and I feel very similar in that authenticity concept because you would pop on because there's like a handful of people that would regularly come on and speak because it was such a big cohort, but then there was just that handful that came to the live calls, showed up and spoke, and you were definitely one of those people also. And you always had like really great questions. I remember doing that. They're like really thinkers, and how then I saw that we had a lot of parallels. I was like, oh wow, this chick means business and she's serious about this work and transformation and healing.
Oh, thank you. Thanks,
Yeah.
Kelsey. Nice to hear. I am a curious person, so I'm glad that that came through.
Yeah, because you talked about, and we'll like speak on it a little bit, because this is the culmination of your work. Like you've been through so many different paths and certifications to like be where you're at now. And that was kind of where you were in it. That's what I remember you speaking on a lot too, of it was all landing of how do I integrate what I know and why am I here to do what I'm doing? And yeah, that's where you're in the thick of it.
Yes. Somatics really was, it felt like the missing piece for me to kind of tie in literally everything else that I had learned. And also it was the linchpin to actually help me like move forward, like out of the healing, the never ending healing process and into something new like that. I really found that in SAWS training. And that was, that was huge.
Me too. I can relate to that exactly. It was that missing piece, which that's kind of what I've noticed in the
Mm,
people that I've really connected with from our cohort. That somatic activated healing ended up being that last little piece that just fell into place that we all needed, which is beautiful. Um, yeah, a little click. So first question, what does soul liberation mean to you?
I love that you asked this question because it's such a big question.
Yeah.
Um, I think soul liberation is really about connecting with your most authentic self, and then not just connecting with that piece, but allowing yourself to show up in all different places of your world, like really allowing that authenticity to move through how you operate in the world, like making choices from that authenticity, building a life from that truest self, and letting it be free so that everybody else can kind of see that and move from that as well.
And receive it.
Yeah, totally. Because I don't think people are really able to understand what that means, like this concept of soul liberation and your truest self, your highest self. Like it can be really abstract and somewhat inaccessible. But I mean, when somebody is showing up as themselves. I think we as humans just kind of have, even if we don't consciously know it, I think we in our bodies can feel when people are being real. And so that to me, as much as I can, trying to show up in spaces as my realist self is what will help others really understand these like big abstract concepts.
Because it is huge and abstract, and that's why I'm choosing that to be my opener for every guest that I interview to just help make it more tangible, to like get that conversation to continually go and receive answers and have different perspectives because it's so massive, and to bring it to like bring more refinement to it because it is something that's actually very real and attainable.
I love how you're doing that in your podcast. I mean, it really is making these like high spiritual concepts so much more accessible to the everyday person. And I think that's a huge part of the work that you and I are trying to do, right? Is making this more like grounded and tangible on earth instead of like, oh, we're ascending to the 5D or whatever, like all that.
I was literally about to say that. That's also the common thread. And the other thing that drew me to you, witnessing you on during the certification process of like, okay, yeah, we're here to ground this in. Like, she also is feeling that and understanding that and figuring that out because if we don't ground it in, then what the fuck are we doing? We're not.
Like what are we reaching for if we're like searching to ascend like beyond this physical plane? Like the whole point is that this is it. Like this is the highest plane you got. Like this is the whole deal. So how do we root down and ground down as we're reaching like, for this like higher positive, like most aligned self and worlds, like how do we also root down into like the fucking reality of what is?
Mhm. Yeah, because we're still human.
We
Uh,
are like, that's it, there's no escaping that.
no. So with all that, what brought you into this line of work to help others with their healing journey? And specifically, I know you a little personally, so like the last 5 years has been really big for you.
Yeah, definitely. Well, honestly, like my whole life, I've always kind of been, the helper, which is not necessarily a good thing, as I have learned, years later, like in a lot of ways that came from a wounded part of me that like wanted to save the world because I thought that would make me valuable. And so I spent most of my life kind of, always being that friend that people would come to with, they needed advice or they needed a shoulder to cry on. And I really valued that in myself. And I don't think it's all bad. Like this through line throughout my life of wanting to be of service. Like I really do value that. And it's something that stuck with me even as I have started to heal those like wounded parts of me. And so the last 5 years specifically, I mean, in around 2020, I started having just really intense burnout. I had had anxiety and depression for most of my life. I had a lot of personal stressors. And then obviously 2020 was just a collective trauma that we were all moving through. And it just kind of threw me for like the biggest loop I'd ever been through. And I burned out really hard. I eventually quit my corporate job 2 years later. And from there, I just dove into all things healing, all things spirituality. I already had a background in psychology and coaching, but it was from this very corporate, you know, old world kind of lens, very Western, and definitely like not decolonized at all. Um, and quitting my job really gave me the space to kind of unpack all of what I had been, swallowing my whole life. And as far as like who I had to be and what this work had to mean and, what was possible for me. And I spent really the last 3 years unpacking all of that and expanding what was possible for me. And in that process, I learned how to manage my anxiety and my depression and my ADHD all like pretty naturally. I honestly haven't had a depressive episode in years, which like I never, if you had asked me this 3 years ago, I never would have thought that that was possible for me. And in that process, I ended up building my own business and really connecting to my purpose and why I'm here on this planet. And yeah, I just really did a full 180. And my business is kind of like I had in my bio, it's really the culmination of all of that. And through my business, I want to help people move through all the things that I've been moving through for the last, 30 years, but especially the last 5 years, and hopefully a lot less time, with more support and more targeted kind of focus, because I feel like I went into so many spaces and it was so hard to navigate it all. And that's really, I want my work to simplify this work and to help people connect to their truest selves and unpack all of the programming that they've grown up with so that they can really be who they want to be instead of who they've been told to be. So that's my spiel.
Out of that whole process, what are some like really big key points that you feel like shaped your character during that time?
Mm. Wow. I think quitting my corporate life, I never really intended it to be forever. I always kind of thought it would be a moment, and who knows what my life will be like. I might return, but leaving that world allowed me to zoom out in such a like large scale way that I hadn't been able to do when I was sitting, at my desk 9 to 5, trying to grind and hustle. Um, and leaving that space really helped me realize like how much of my life had been programmed around my ability to produce and get things done and be efficient, and like how much of my natural flow and creativity and rhythm had been stripped from me in order for me to show up every day like a robot. So that I think was a huge piece. And I know it's huge because as I've been learning and speaking about the things I've been learning, like I can see the way people still in corporate react to some of the things that I talk about. It's really hard for some people to receive and to kind of open up their worldview around, because of course they have to sit down from 9 to 5 and do the work, and it can be really like hard to confront that maybe there are parts of you that have been stripped away in order for you to show up in that space. So that I think was huge, like being able to take that space. I think I am so grateful that I was able to do that, because I don't think I would be as connected to myself and to my natural flow and my creativity if I hadn't been able to do that. Like I fully feel like I'm a different person because of that.
And you need that space. Like as soon as you leave something like that or that system, it's not an automatic like switch or flip to then be the person that you know is for you or of serving you more or more in your truth. It's not oh, I quit my job. Now I'm brand new.
Nope.
Yeah, it's like no, this and this will bring me into the next question, but it's within the body when it's something that big and massive when we make big change in that way. So for you in that process, how did somatic work support you through that time period, and how did it help you weave that into the work that you're doing now with clients?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think, quitting my corporate job gave me the space, right, to start to look at all of these things and take care of myself for the first time. But I had no idea how to do anything different. I guess specifically, I'm thinking when I started to be like, okay, I'm going to build this service based business, I'm going to work for myself. I had no idea how to sit down and create outside of the way I had been taught to create my whole life, right? Like I had absolutely no idea how to use a different set of rules or a different set of tools to help me build something that wouldn't just burn me right back out again. And so when I first came, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna build my own business, but I was still so wrapped up in, well, this is the way I should show up and this is how business is supposed to be. And, I was looking externally for other people to show me what the right way is to build a business. Just like school, I wanted to get the formula and regurgitate it and get a gold star and a pat on the back. And that's what I was looking for so long. And it took me a while to realize that I actually had the opportunity and actually the like what feels like the imperative, like the obligation for me to do it differently. Like I was in this space where I wasn't going to build it the same way.
Because you
But
can't. It's like you it's you can't.
yeah, I mean, you could, but then you're just doing the same shit that burned you out in the first place, right? And the thing about doing something new, like breaking your patterns and breaking your habits, you're going to have to teach your body that it's safe to do that. And our bodies are so conditioned. I mean, our brains and our bodies and our souls are so conditioned to believe that the way we've been taught our whole lives is the only way. And if you step outside of that, there is like an actual conditioned fear response in our bodies that says, hold on, like, hell no. If you do it that way, it's dangerous. If you do it outside of what we've been told, like, you're going to be misunderstood, you're going to be poor, you're going to be hurt, whatever the fear narrative is, like, it triggers all of this, like, physical wounding. And so to choose something new and to say, like, actually, body, it's cool for me to, break the status quo and choose something different. Like you really have to teach your body and practice holding that safety in your body.
And being with that discomfort because that's going to happen. That is
Yeah.
going to happen point blank, period. And because that happens, that's a lot of times why people don't do it or stick to it to then see the other side or to see the change in their fear response.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. Because why would I? Like, this world is already so fucking exhausting. Like, why would I add more onto my plate? Like, this is uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. I just want to, like, literally, like, be told what to do and then get the pat on the back and, like, chug along and continue on my life. And um I mean, that's so valid. Like, it's really hard to choose something new, especially when the new things and the new patterns that you're choosing are so outside of what everybody else is doing around you and what the world around you is still constantly reinforcing. Like, this world is still teaching you every day, like, this way's right, this way's wrong. And if you do it the wrong way, like, you're lazy or you're, a hippie or like
Or all
whatever.
this punishment, which makes that's what makes it terrifying. Instead of learning a lesson, then you're punished.
Right. And so it makes a lot of sense that a lot of people don't want to sit with that discomfort. But like you said, like that's just if you want to grow, if you want to literally change, like actually change something, whether it's like a new habit or an entire new way of being, like you have to be able to sit with that discomfort. And so somatic work is what was the first thing ever that I had ever heard in my entire life that was like, here is how you do that.
Mm.
Like beyond here's how you, think more positively and change your mindset, which is what my coaching background from corporate coaching was really all about, like changing your mindset, which it has value. Somatics is the piece that really taught me like, this is how you show your body that it's safe to be uncomfortable and that you can handle it and that you can move through it, and hold yourself through whatever comes up around it so that you can get to the other side. And on the other side, like there's a whole new world waiting for you.
Yeah, was your introduction to somatic work the SAW method, or did you have some experience beforehand?
I had a little bit. I worked with a therapist for a while who had somatic training, but SAW was really my first like deep dive into it. And then of course, like the work we had to do to be able to be certified to teach and to lead, like it was so much more involved than I
Mhm.
ever anticipated. And I did a yoga teacher training back when I first graduated out of college, and that was really similar to some of the stuff that we learned with SAW. But honestly, when I was right out of college, like I wasn't really ready to like hear what yoga had to teach me, you know, and SAW was the first place where I was really like, oh, like this is different. Like the body, the language of the body was a whole new world for me.
Yeah, and I think the like ready sensation for me and how I identify that, because when you're diving deep and you're really connecting into the inner darkness and all feelings, pleasant and unpleasant, in the unknown, you're never truly ready. But what I would identify as ready is like, oh, you're willing to take accountability, like radical accountability. When you're ready for that, then you're ready to receive somatic work. And like you said, like, oh, I wasn't ready in my early 20s, but with SAW, I was ready. Then I could already tell, yeah, you're an accountable person. So it's that you're ready for that and to take accountability to change your life. And I think that's what somatics in all realms demands of people if you truly want to integrate that healing.
Yeah, which, like it's hard to get to that place where you're ready to kind of drop the stories of your victimhood and to say like, okay, I'm going to choose something new here. I always say like you can't force anybody to release their victimhood until they're ready. And it's so important, like it's such an important part of our healing to sit with that space to say like, yeah, I was hurt, and this, to acknowledge it and to say it out loud and to be in that story and to allow yourself to feel like a victim. Like I don't want to discount that, because that's the first step, right? Like
Mhm.
we have to go there first. We have to hold space for that. So if you're not ready to move on, like that's okay. Like you got to sit in that grief and in that rage that you have.
I was
Um,
literally about to say in that grief, like it's the grief to sit, and then that's the doorway to accountability, like after being with the grief of what has happened to you.
Yeah, definitely. And, that's if you got to sit there first, that's okay. But you're not going to get out of that until you take accountability and really make the choice to release the victim stories that you've been living in, which is hard. It's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people.
It is. So, with the victim stories, now then let's talk about anxiety, perfectionism, people pleasing, burnout, and the common thread between them. For me, when I look at those things, because those are issues that are something that you really work with and with your clients. And my personal common thread when I look at those issues is self-betrayal is what comes to me when I look at those things. So what about you and like and why you're here to help with those people with those things specifically?
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Like I would call it the rejection of self. Like all of these things are what happens when we understandably, are existing in a world and in a life where we are constantly neglecting ourselves and betraying ourselves for something outer, which, in our current society, in the way that we have told people to be, everything about this world, like we were talking about earlier, tells you that the most important thing is for you to be productive, to be efficient, to make as much money as you can, to keep the wheels of these systems turning. And all of those values and the way we are taught to embody those things, it tells us, like, it teaches us how to chronically disconnect from our bodies and from ourselves. Like from the time you're in school and you have to literally like ask to go to the bathroom and your teacher can say yes or no whether or not you're allowed to use the bathroom, like we are conditioned to put our bodies and our true desires and our soul wish on the shelf in order to show up as our most effective, most productive, like robot 9 to 5 selves. And I want to say too, like, this isn't all bad, right? Like the things that we've learned in this culture isn't all bad. Like there are good things around structure and stability and like being productive. Like I think it's really easy to forget all of that. But the problem comes when we teach all of those things at the cost of ourselves. And when my clients come to me with anxiety or feeling, incredibly burnt out or doing a lot to try to attain this identity of like this perfect person who like never upsets anybody, like they are worrying about everybody else. They're worrying about how they show up in regards to like, capitalism basically,
Yep.
and like all the things that it teaches, right? And they're not thinking about themselves. They're ignoring what they actually want. They're ignoring what their feelings actually are. They're ignoring their desires. And so for me, in moving through that, the first step with my clients is to help them see that that's what's happening, that it's not just this like that they're broken and that's why they've been anxious their whole lives. Like that's just the biggest lie they've ever been told. Like anxiety is your body saying like, you're not giving me what I want. You're not
Mm-hmm.
giving me, I need more. So for me, the pathway to healing through all of these things is to be able to start to tune inwards and say like, well, why am I burning the fuck out? Like, why am I so anxious? Why is it so terrifying for me to go against the status quo or to, advocate for a need or to be imperfect, whatever it is? Like, what is it that my body is asking for and what do I need? And really, once you start to facilitate that, like return to the self, I mean, it all just kind of kicks into motion.
And that's where you connect with those feelings that are present when you ask those questions, and they'll give you answers. People think it's the wildest thing. I'm like, just ask your body, talk to it, talk to yourself. Like you will receive an answer.
But this like concept of like asking yourself, I mean, it's so foreign. Like you sit down with somebody who's never done this work before and you're like, well, even just like, what do you think about that? Or what does your body think about that? To begin to sift through all of the voices in their brain, they're like, well, which one is me? And which one is my anxiety? And what's my intuition? And, especially when we start to say, like, what does your body say? There's like barely any language around what that even means. Like it takes so much practice to unlearn this disconnection because we've never been taught how to do that.
Mhm. And with self-betrayal and understanding what that is and isn't, and listening and connecting to the intuition. Like the main thing for me is like your intuition would never ask you to neglect yourself.
Never. So true.
Like never. So when you're trying to learn how to detangle the programming and intuition, it's like that's such a big thing is your intuition would never ask you to neglect yourself. When you
Right.
follow intuition isn't always going to be comfy cozy
No,
because that's not the barometer.
no.
The barometer is you're turning to self-love instead of self-neglect.
Yes. Which is really hard to, parse out from all of, especially when your conditioning is, 30 years deep of like how you should be, or, what you have convinced yourself is what you want and what you desire and who you are because of, what your parents taught you or what your friends tell you or whatever it is. Like it's really hard to start to really dive into that piece. But you're right, like that's what it is. Your intuition is never going to ask you to betray yourself. It's never going to tell you how you should be. Like that's for me, like if you got a should in that brain, like that's a red flag that you are not aligned. Like you are listening to something external because your intuition and your body is going to give you what you need and what you want, not what you should be doing.
And you might piss people off when you do that.
Oh, yeah, actually, I can confirm you're 100% going to piss people off
Yeah.
when you do it, which was a hard one for me as a people pleaser to move through. Like that was the most terrifying part of the last couple of years was actually saying, like, actually, you're hurting my feeling. And oh, actually, like, I don't want to do that. Or, whatever it is, like, you're going to upset the people that benefited from you, keeping quiet
Mhm.
and betraying yourself. And even beyond that, like even when people, weren't necessarily like benefiting from that, I think you're going to piss people off who aren't ready to confront in themselves what you're confronting. And that's a really, really hard one to deal with because, especially as the helper, like I want to hold space for those people to show them, like, well, actually, babe, like you're projecting. And if you only just look at like what's happening for you, but like you can't be doing that for everybody. It's
No.
definitely going to piss some people off. And that is hard, but it's necessary. And honestly, being on the other side of pissing off a lot of people in my life, I'm like, I am so much stronger. I'm a different person. I'm a brand new person. And I love myself. Like I'm so happy with who I am now in a way that I never had before. And it was through that, like pissing everybody off, that I was able to find that me. So it's a shit show, but it's worth it, I promise.
Yeah, for real. And I agree. Like, I didn't start to feel solid within myself until that people pleasing wound was just extracted from its root. Like that it just had to go. And with those literally and all those projections that you're talking about and or being that mirror that confronts it within other people when you do stand up for yourself and when you do say no, that's the piece to take with you of like it's not personal. Like people's reaction to you speaking up or saying no or disagreeing or whatever it may be, it's their reaction to that is not personal if you're coming from a place of kind intention, because that's really the best that you can do. And even then,
Yeah.
you're going to piss people off.
Oh, you're totally still gonna piss them off. And like the hard part is that they're gonna really make it about you. Like they're gonna really go, you, and look at all the things that you're doing that's wrong. And so it's gonna be really hard to parse that out and be like, it's not about me, but it's really not in the end. And I have that clarity because I know myself and I know what my intentions were. And I know also, yeah, I pissed a lot of people off, but I've also deepened so many relationships like on such an incredible scale that I never thought, like just like intimacy beyond intimacy that I ever knew was possible, because those people, saw this new me in this new iteration and said, hey, I want to know you and I want to understand you. And I'm going to choose to work through what I need to work through so that I can meet this new you. So not everyone's going to piece out from your life. Like there will also, you'll see how it deepens your connections in other areas. And that helps you kind of get through it because that it is working. You are calling in, aligned people, but you're also unfortunately just going to have to leave behind the people who aren't ready for you.
And most of the time, they see themselves out. It's not even that you're wanting to end the connection, like they see themselves out. So it's really not about you.
Yeah, it's really not. And that can feel like rejection. And it did for me a lot. Still rejection that I'm moving through. But, I'm so grounded in who I am that it's like all been worth it.
This is where authenticity is birthed when you're burning through the people pleasing. Like, this is it.
Literally, like, who are you without all of the masks and all of the roles that you play for everybody else? Like, who the fuck
Mhm.
am I? Like,
Yeah.
you that is where you find who you are underneath all of the roles that you're playing.
And then the people that are drawn to you from that, or the people that stay as a result of you coming into that, that's how you know. Then they're drawn to your truth and who you actually are. Because now for me, I'm like, that's all I want. Why do I want someone that is attracted to me for a facade that I'm putting on? Like, I don't want that around.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to move through it. Of course, like it brings up all all the feelings that you've been ignoring your whole life, but it really is at the end like so worth it to me.
So let's talk a little bit more about people pleasing on this string of stuff that you help people move through. Or we just did people pleasing. I meant perfectionism.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, perfectionism is just the same thing, right? Like people pleasing is putting on a mask for somebody else and not wanting to make somebody else uncomfortable. And then perfectionism is just like betraying who you really are for this idea that there is perfection, like this external, facade, really, that there is something or that there is a state that you can reach of perfection. Like it's a self-betrayal just for a different reason. It's just like not wanting to face the whatever you're making it mean about you when you are not perfect, right? Like whatever that means about your value or your worth as a human. Like if you are able to allow yourself to be imperfect, which we all are, by the way, like literally perfection doesn't exist. It's just something else that we've been sold. When you're able to sit in that, you're able to meet who you really are and what your strengths are and what you're actually able to offer. So when you're grinding for perfectionism, it's the same thing. It's rejecting what you really are and what you really desire and what you're really capable of for this like external ideal.
Yeah, for me, what comes up a lot with that is when I learned the deeper layers of perfectionism is like, oh man, this is protecting me from my shame. Like, oh shit.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think like all of these behaviors, whether it's people pleasing or perfectionism, like they are ultimately protecting us from the discomfort, right? Like we've been talking about of all of the feelings that we're holding inside of us. And shame is like, I mean, so prevalent in all of us because we've been shamed our whole lives for who we are and like for what we need and for what our bodies need. And, um, you know, perfectionism, like that's something I chased my entire life because, at some point, whether it was my upbringing or society or whatever, like I learned that if I was the best in school and in work, and if I did all of the things right, then I would get the gold star. And then that was external proof that I was lovable and that I was enough and that I was worth something. Because everybody would tell me, like, wow, you're so, good at this and you're good at this. And look at you, like getting all the grades and getting your master's and climbing the ranks, getting a promotion like within your first year of work, like all of this. It was this drive for something else to tell me that I was deserving of love and that I was good enough. And for me to stop being perfect from this external scale, which is really what I did the last 5 years, I quit my job and people started being like, what is this girl doing over here? Like that for me, I had to face the part of me that believed the lie that I wasn't worthy if I wasn't doing all these things. And I had to face the shame, like you said.
And just that identity of something that's outside of you instead of you. Because who would you be without all those things that you strive to be perfect at?
Right. And I mean, I really had to face that in the last couple of years, like, externally, like trying to move through all the things I was moving through. And now I've been out of the corporate workforce for 3 years. And, it's really easy to start to compare myself to some of my peers who like stayed in their jobs and are like 8, 9, 10 years into their, very professional and beautiful looking careers. And like I have friends who are buying homes and like I was busy, like literally vomiting up my shame and like I was doing different things, and that I really had to be able to give myself that, like, actually, it doesn't matter what your life looks like and what all these people think or, what you perceive them to be thinking. Like, it matters what you think and whether you like yourself and whether you're happy with your choices. And so that was breaking down perfectionism was a huge piece of that because I had to be like, what the fuck is perfect anyway? Oh,
Mhm.
it's a lie that we've all been sold.
Yep.
And guess what? Spoiler alert, everybody has this core wound of not enough. Like that's what it is. Everybody deep down believes that they're not enough, and it's because we've been taught that, right? We've been taught by our parents and their parents and by the system that has been raising us for generations. And now we have to teach ourselves something different.
hmm I'm laughing so hard at you giving that example because it was just this past Thanksgiving. My cousin, he's 10 years older than me, so he's 41, and just was talking about life and work. And he's been at his job for 20 years now, and he's getting this like 20-year corporate gift. And he's like, I just paid off my house. And I was like, I am
Yeah.
nowhere near that. And
You're
just like,
like, well, so
yeah, I love myself, and that's a win.
happy. So
Yeah. And it's
yeah,
just so funny because then it's like none of that shit matters anyway. Those things, like what matters is what I have within. And like I would take that any day over this outward view of quote unquote security.
yeah. And like, it also gave me the space the last couple of years of this work to look around and be like, do I even want these
Yeah.
things? I spent my whole life thinking that I was just honestly like, when I was a kid, people would call me like a future CEO, like fresh out of the womb, I would talk about being the first woman president. Like I thought that I was going to climb all of these, the ladders and be this person. And I didn't even ever stop to question if that's what I actually wanted. Right. Like it was just what was told to me and
Mhm.
wanted parts of it. Right. But this time and this space and this work allowed me to be like, okay, wait, I don't actually even want these things. And like, yeah, sure, maybe it'd be nice to own a home, but like I actually am not even sure if that's something I want right now. Like I love the freedom renting gives me, and I love living in the city, and I don't know if I want to like buy a home here. And like all of these things, like we never even stop to question if it's what we actually want. We're just like on the hamster wheel.
Mhm.
um so taking the space helps you be like, okay, what do I actually want?
Yeah, so let's break that down a little further in the terms of somatics. So why is somatic work essential for these type of issues and how you guide others? And then also with that, like what's your approach to working with clients when they come to you with these things?
Well, yeah, I mean, like we were talking about earlier, the somatic piece is really what helps you expand your capacity to be in the discomfort, which, as we said, is like a mandatory part of this process. Like, if you want to, especially if you want to break down the conditioning of what our societal conditioning is, like that is, it's not like, yeah, it's your trauma from your parents, it's your trauma from, your childhood, but it's also like this deep seated programming from generations. Like it's generational trauma, and it's systemic wounding that we have. So if you want to move through all of that and actually show up as somebody different, you're going to have to learn how to expand your capacity to allow those feelings of discomfort and all of the wounds and the emotions of those wounds to move through you and release, because that's what's happening. Like you can't step into something new right now because you are so weighed down by those wounds and by the emotional, pain that you have been shoving down your whole life. You've been telling your body like you're too sensitive, you're too much, like, your needs aren't important. You've been betraying your body for so long that if we want to move forward, you're going to have to learn how to release that. And somatics helps us first expand our capacity to even know what the fuck I'm talking about, right? Like to first fit in that, to know what's happening in your body, and then also to release the residue, which is like kind of secondary. Like first you have to build the language, and then you can release the residue. And so that is the major part of my coaching and in my one-on-ones and also in my group programs. Like it's all about building the capacity to be with the body and resourcing ourselves so that it feels safe enough to start to sit with the discomfort, and then moving, as we're able, slowly titrating out those feelings little by little so that you can make space for the new you and the new life that you want to build. And my background is in, like I said, in this corporate coaching. I was trained with the International Coaching Federation, and I'm a certified coach with them. And that was so, so valuable, but it was so top down. Like it was just so of the mind, right? It really had nothing to do with the body. Which I think is great because I now have both, right? Like I have this mindset coaching to help you move through these limiting beliefs and move through the mindset work that you need to. But I also have the body piece of like, okay, but how do we actually believe something new? Like I get it, I've identified my limiting beliefs, but how do I actually start to believe something different?
Because yeah, working with it, you cannot journal your way out of a limiting belief. Like you just can't. Like and to me, like even beyond, like it's more than just a limiting belief. Because if we keep, like you said, it's the top down limiting belief and journaling on that, we're in the mind space. But if we peel back the layers, it's connected to a core wound and feeling that you haven't looked at and faced and felt yet.
Mhm. Yeah. And like all the mindset work, that is valuable because, especially when we are existing in this world where we have no idea how to be with our bodies, it can be a pathway, right, to start to get to ourselves. Like for a lot of my clients, I work with a lot of high achieving perfectionists, like sensitive women who are often like in these careers, like deep in their burnout, whether it's a corporate career. I also work with a lot of like helping professions. Like I have so many nurses and teachers and caretakers in my world, and coaches and therapists, things like that. And those people are usually like so deep in their neglecting of themselves that the mindset work is like it's like step one, right? Like literally, like, can you even start to parse out like what's happening in your brain? Like make space for that. So, journaling is a great tool to start. And like all of these mindset practices are great ways to start to turn inwards. But then from there, the goal is to move deeper into less of the story and more of the language of the body. But that is not something that you can just like sit down and do right away. It takes time. And so the mindset work is really valuable. Like I definitely don't want to, discount that, but it's really like the pathway, I think, to the deeper work of being with your body.
Right, because like we said, we are humans. There's no getting out of being human, and part of being human is our brain, is our mind. And
Totally.
that's the doorway, like these stories and these things and this overthinking that's in the mind, it points us to what's actually going on. So
Yeah.
we
And
cannot discount it.
totally. I mean, to get a hang of the stories first is a great start. Like to understand what even are the stories and the different parts of me. Like when you've never done that, it's great, but it's incomplete.
hmm What are some introductory somatic tools and work that you start with your clients?
So it's so interesting because a lot of times I just actually started a group program, and already, everyone's like, okay, well, can you give me a somatic tool to like stop feeling anxious? And like immediately when people think about somatics, it's like they want a tool to bypass
Yeah.
feeling of discomfort, right? And so I'm really wary to be like, oh, here's a tool, like
To
because
drop into your body, not to get over and through and just like band-aid the feeling, but it's like to connect to the body.
right. Like the goal is to be with the body so that you can feel the anxiety and
Yes.
feel the emotions of, that you move through after the anxiety. Um, and so when I start with my clients who are brand new, have never done any somatic work, it's really like it's a slow build. And we start by I do have tools, we've got breath work, we've got all these different ways to start checking in with the body. I love personally, of course, because somatic activated healing is all about dance, like ecstatic dance saved my life in a lot of ways. And so I offer these tools, but before I even start to give them all these tools, I really work with them to start to learn how to tune inwards and, be paying attention to even just the sensations of their body. Like, literally one of the first things I do is like, okay, orient to your surroundings. And sometimes that enough for people to be like, oh, I can take a second to look around and orient to my room. Like that's the first time that anybody's ever told them to do that. And then from there, it's okay. What do you smell? What do you hear? What do you feel? And starting to give them that practice of being still without creating labels and creating stories and judgments. And then, we start to work in tools, but it's beyond the tools. It's not about bypassing. It's about being in the body.
Mhm. Which is so important. And that's the big reminder too, because a lot of people feel so intimidated entering the somatic world and connecting to their body. And when you connect with a professional who's been in the field and walks the walk, not just like got a certification and then didn't do anything, any integration in their own life, um,
Right.
they'll take you slow. So it's like we understand that level of intimidation that's coming forward, and we're not here to just blast you open.
Right. And actually like blasting somebody open is going to cause so much more damage than it is good. Like we're talking about decades of like stuck emotions.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can just be like, I think people are always looking for like catharsis, when we talk about somatics, they're like, I need to go and like scream and cry and rage, and like those are valuable tools, but it's not always about catharsis. Like it's about slowly creating safety in the body to expand that capacity so your body learns it's okay to be here and feel those feelings. And if you try to get all of that out at once, it's going to overwhelm your nervous system. It's going to freak you out, and it's not going to be conducive to you being able to like continuing to function in the life you have to function in. Because a lot of times we don't have the ability to quit our corporate jobs and spend 3 years like deep diving into our healing. And so the work I do, I don't want you to have to quit your job to be able to do this, and I don't think you need to. Like that was my path, right? But it doesn't have to be everyone's path. And we make it more accessible by titrating it out slowly, by allowing these things that need to move through you when your body feels like it's safe to do so. Not because like I, blew up your nervous system and now we're going to be like weeping for months on end. Like it's not right.
Yeah, because going from one survival mode of being in corporate world and pushing through to survival mode of now how am I gonna pay my bills? That's where we just flip. We just
Right.
pendulum swung to the other side.
It's not providing stability and safety for the body. Okay. I really had to learn a lot of things around my money fears. So let's not do it all at once. Like it's okay if that's not your path. It's actually better, I think.
Yeah, I get that too. So along with these issues with anxiety, perfectionism, people pleasing, burnout, but another big thing that you work with is ushering people into the new world. So how does working with those specific issues usher people into the new world, and what is the new world to you?
Thanks. I love this question. Yeah. So, like we were saying earlier, I want to be careful when we talk about this because I think in the spiritual world, especially like in Western New Age spirituality, we can really hear a lot about this like new world concept, and it can be really inaccessible and really like abstract. And all I'm talking about is this world. Like I'm talking about this physical plane building something different for us so that we are not continuing to raise future generations from this place of disconnection from the self and disconnection from the body and the soul. When I talk about, old world, new world, like the old world to me is the rules and the programming and the systems that we have been raised in for generations. And they are like deeply colonial and, tied up in patriarchy and white supremacy and like rampant capitalism. Like, I think it's really important to say those things out loud. Like, that's what I'm talking about here. And, all of these people pleasing, perfectionism, like these are values of white supremacy, right? And of patriarchy and of a disconnection from our earth and from our land and from our bodies and from our souls. So when I'm talking about the new world, I'm talking about building a different future for ourselves and also for, future generations. I think right now, especially, we are deep in this like huge period of transformation and so much is happening. Like there is so much chaos on our earth. In many ways, I think because so many people are awakening to how broken and how violent and horrible these systems are. Um, and it's really easy, I think, to get into doom thinking and to believe it's the apocalypse. And I see it a lot in my peers. A lot of people are like really nihilistic about the future, and they're like, the world's ending. So who cares? Like, let me just get back to, grind away and make as much money as I can for me and my family and live my life. And
Which is
um,
perpetuating
which is
colonization.
really, we're just continuing down the same path, right? Like when we're putting our head in the sand and working hard to like make capitalism work for us, which listen, like we all have to survive here, okay, right? So we all have to participate in the system. Like, let's be clear,
Mm-hmm.
part of the system is its own privilege, right? So we all have to participate in it. But for me, when I talk about the new world and ushering people into the new world, like how can we continue to operate as we must in order to survive, while also unpacking and using our privilege, because so many of our peers that we're talking about are way more privileged than they want to admit, right? Like they have the capacity to choose something new. They just like are kind of lazy and don't really want to, or it's been too hard for them. But that, like, I want us to hold that we have to exist in these systems and do what we have to survive, while also unpacking what we are able to as we are able to, and figuring out like how do I build something different while still living in this world. Like how do I hold the vision of something better and something more beautiful for us, where people are cared for, where our society does value our connection to ourselves and to each other, and values soul liberation. Like how do I build that new world here on earth? And so that's what I'm talking about. And I think the process is what we've been saying. It's turning inwards and getting clear on what we actually value and what our soul's desire really is. And once you're clear on like who you are and like what you really want, like honestly, it becomes impossible to continue building in the old way, like because it's a betrayal. And so for me, ushering in the new world is helping as many souls as possible awaken to their true selves, so that it's inevitable that they will build something different for them and their communities and their loved ones, so it ripples out and actually does build a new world, which I have enough faith and belief that it's possible. I don't feel like it is productive for me to live in the doom. And that's not to say I'm bypassing the horrible things that are existing, right? Like I'm calling it out. That's part of the work, is to look at the darkness. But how do we look at the darkness while holding the vision of something better?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these issues, that's the word that I've been using just for this particular podcast episode. These issues are not even necessarily issues. They're survival mechanisms to get us through this capitalized society that has been built. So that's also where the grace comes in, of like you've built these skills to survive in a world that was meant to destroy you. So
Right.
congratulations for living, because like this is what got you here. And then like you said, with this new world, now it's showing of, hey, how can we construct something on the inside to where we don't have to lean on these survival mechanisms anymore to get by, because we're creating a new world for ourselves.
Totally. Yeah. And, like, I think also part of this healing process is being able to look at these protective mechanisms, like the people who are dealing with like people pleasing and perfectionism. Like I said, like these are really sensitive people who like really give a shit about the world. And
Mhm.
that's they developed all of these patterns, right? Is because they really cared about making everybody else happy and making sure that the people around them were cared for. And like that's not all bad. Like there are people who grew up in this system and they chose a totally different path of domination and violence and not giving a fuck about the rest of the world, right? So like part of healing these behaviors is also like giving, like you said, like giving them love for what they were, because like yes, they're protective and they're preventing you from really stepping into your true self, but also like there's so much good in them. Like there is, I love that that's what I wanted to do, was to try to help everybody else feel safe, like that's the beautiful thing about me, that I care so deeply about everybody else. It's just like, okay, girl, like you also should give that care to yourself, right? Like, but it's not all about like all of these things that you learned are bad. It's not so black and white. It's not so binary. It's integrating it into a more balanced and like wholesome part of you, so that you're not betraying yourself in the process.
Yeah, and none of these are binary, and that's the work of somatic works is to discern that what about this quality is actually serving and what's the positive intent behind this behavior. And we don't get there unless we're in the discomfort of it and we see where it is actually an issue to then be like, okay, where can I utilize it for my power instead of to my detriment?
Right. 100%, which is like such an important distinction. Like, I think when I first started my healing journey, I was like, oh, I have to like unpack and stop masking and, like completely dismantle all of these things. And I had to do that to like, understand them. But now I'm like, oh, actually, like some of these things that you did, like some of these protective mechanisms, especially because we are still existing in this fucked up world, like sometimes masking is good, right? Like it can support you in certain ways. And like it's not all about just like fully dismantling everything you've known. I mean, it is a little bit, but it's like we're not rejecting
Both
all.
and.
Yeah, totally. Which like both and is a really hard concept for people in our culture because once we start holding both and like then we're thinking critically and that's not convenient for our systems of power. So it's a hard one to grasp, but somatics helps you get there.
hmm So I also know that you're here to help change makers. And so how does someone know if they're a change maker and what does that mean for you?
I think change makers, you will know if you're a change maker, especially like right now in this time in our history, if you feel a calling or a buzzing, some sort of disturbance in the force that's telling you that how you have been and like what you have been doing is no longer right. And like the way that you have been living, the way that we have all been living is no longer right. Like I think so many people right now are looking around at their lives and they're looking at the state of the world and they're like, how the hell am I supposed to continue? How am I supposed to show up to my 9 to 5 and send my little emails and, pretend like the world isn't literally on fire? Like that buzzing that you have, that calling, that is your soul like knocking on your heart, saying that actually you're not supposed to go as you have been. You're not supposed to continue. This world isn't supposed to continue. Oh, sorry. My computer is broken and I can't turn off my do not disturb. But, anyways, yeah, this calling is telling you that you're not supposed to continue as it has been. You're not supposed to continue on the status quo. And I think if you are hearing that call for something different, that's how you know, like, you are meant to be birthing this new world with us. Like, you are meant to be liberating your soul. You are meant to be leaning into your purpose and grounding into what makes this world worth living so that we can build something new. So if you're feeling that buzzing, that's what that is. Like you are an activist, you are a visionary, you are an artist, you are a change maker. And if you're feeling that call, like it's time for something new, babe.
It's time.
It's time. Like, let's go, girl. We need you. We need as many liberated souls on this fucking earth as much as we can. Like as many as we can, we need them.
And that's why we do what we do. Like that's that massive change. So we're nearing the end, and I want you to share all of your lovely offerings because you just shared so much potent, powerful information, and we know that you're out here and doing the damn thing. So what specifically are your offerings and how are you out here?
Yeah, thanks, Kelsey. So I just launched a workbook called the Unbecoming Workbook, and that is really like an intro to some of the things that we're talking about. It's really focused on unlearning and unbecoming all of these things that we've been taught. And that is it's a 3 month self-paced journey for anybody who wants to kind of get an intro to this work. It's $27. And it's really meant to be an accessible resource. So that's like my most accessible way to kind of dive into this work. I also have one-on-one coaching. It's somatic and mindset coaching. You can sign up or apply to be a part of my coaching in the link in my bio on all of my socials. And then I also just launched a community program where we're moving through the work of unbecoming together as a community over the next 3 months. The current round is closed, but you can sign up to be on the wait list for the next round coming in spring. Also at a link in my bio.
In spring, like March, spring, April, spring, or do you kind of know a date yet?
I make no promises. Part of this business is allowing my flow to kind of take me where I want to go. But yeah, probably sometime like March or April, maybe May. But
Who knows?
yeah, spring 2025.
Yeah, that'll be perfect because this episode will come out in February. So the people that come across this and this is really speaking to you, then that would be the time to get in on that wait list. And so you'll have the information that you need to enter the room, enter the space.
Yeah. And if you don't want to wait for my group program, my one-to-one coaching is really where I think a lot of the magic happens, because that's where we really get to work on individually what's happening for you and teaching you the skills you need to be with your body and move through these feelings. So one-to-one coaching spots are open.
Mm. And last question, what are some ways that you create light?
Mm. Oh man, I think the number one thing for me is honestly transmuting my shit and handling all of the grief and all of the rage and all of the things that want to be expressed through me, allowing the space to move through those things so that I can show up as a container for others to do that work. Like that's why I do what I do, is so that I can bring my light and bring my capacity and my love to as many people as I can. Like in order to do that, I have to move through my own shit. And that allows me, like, even beyond just like space holding, like that allows me to show up in the world, like connecting to joy and connecting to hope and connecting to all of the good things that make life worth living. And as much as possible, I try to ground into, the mundane, like beautiful things of like being with my dog and going outside, like being in nature, just like these things that are always available to us that we have taken for granted so deeply. Like, I think being present with all of these things is is how I create light.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. And we're going to put all the stuff in your show notes, all in the show notes, all of that. But this has been just such a breezeful, easy conversation to like speak about these things with you. And I just love being in connection with you and growing from this space.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me and for all of your kind words. I'm receiving them for sure. I feel the same about you. This is just so exciting for us to be doing this work like together. And I am just so happy to be on this journey with you and can't wait to see where we go next.
And it's just the beginning.
Totally. Just getting started.
Yeah. And thank you all for listening. And remember, when we see the light in ourselves, we create light in others.